Hi, it's Coach Arns again, here to talk this time about the Reformation, the beginning of the Reformation. And normally we think about the very beginning of the Reformation as when Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses on the door at the church in Wittenberg. And there's a very famous painting of him doing this posting, but I think there was a little bit of poetic license in the painting because nobody's really sure if he actually nailed them. But he did write them. He did send them off to church authorities, and then they started using the famous printing press to print a whole bunch of copies of it and send his ideas all over. Now, what Luther really objected to was the selling of indulgences. And indulgences was something that kind of sprang out of the Crusades. The idea that you could kind of pay for a release of sin. And so there were priests and other church officials going around Europe, telling people, if you pay me some money, if you pay money to the church, then you'll get pardoned of your sins. And, we know that's not really the way for salvation. But Luther was really the first one that was brave enough to stand up and say, this is wrong. Selling of indulgences is not how you get to heaven. The Catholic Church was also saying that it wasn't just faith that got you to church, but it was also good works. And the indulgences, I guess, was kind of part of that good works philosophy. So Luther studied the Bible a lot. Luther said, after years of study, said there's really only one way to get to heaven, and that is faith. And that's faith alone will get you to heaven. Doesn't matter how many great things you do, faith alone gets you to heaven. So he had a few other objections with the Catholic Church. He said that really the Pope was like a false authority. Luther also believed that anybody could read the Bible and make decisions for themselves, especially on things like the sacrament. He read the Bible and he never really found a whole list of sacraments in the Bible, and that was another one of his objections. And also part of where just him reading the Bible came to figure out that that a person can read the Bible and find their way to salvation through faith in Jesus Christ. So when Luther did this posting of the 95 Theses, initially the Pope said he thought Luther was just kind of deranged. And in fact, one of his quotes was something about, he told people, don't worry about it. Luther's probably just some drunk German writing this stuff. Once he sobers up, he'll amend his ways. And Luther didn't. This was 1517 is when he posted the Theses. A couple years later, the same Pope basically finally decided that all this stuff Luther was saying was heresy. It was really against the church and against the teachings of Christianity. So he told the Pope to recant, and recant means, say you don't really believe it. And Luther said, no, I really do believe it. And the Pope then excommunicated. Big fancy word means excommunication means you're kicked out of. So the Pope technically kicked Luther out of the Catholic Church. So a lot of things go along with that. But he also said that Luther had to again recant and say he didn't really mean this. Luther didn't, again. And then the Holy Roman Emperor, his name was Charles V. Now Charles V was a Habsburg, and we'll talk more about the Habsburgs as we go. The Habsburgs were a very powerful royal family that ruled a lot of Europe. They were also the Holy Roman Emperors. A great title. It didn't mean they owned all the land. But anyway, Charles V was a devout Catholic and closely tied with the Pope, not just spiritually, but also politically. And Charles V then issued a decree called the Edict of Worms. It's spelled Worms, and just makes a whole lot more sense to say the Edict of Worms. But anyway, this was a legal decree from the emperor that said if anybody helps Luther, then they could be charged with all sorts of crimes for helping Luther, because Luther was a heretic, and Charles V, as well as Pope, said that Luther was wrong in what he said, and anyway, that was the Edict of Worms, and by the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. All right. So for about 25 years, the people that live in what we now know as Germany, back then it was called the Holy Roman Empire, and as Voltaire said, was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But for about 25 years, these German princes kind of argued and actually fought kind of wars with each other over whether it was okay to be Catholic or non-Catholic, Catholic or Lutheran, as they eventually became known as, people who followed Martin Luther and his teachings. And it was at the Peace of Augsburg, about 25 years later, that the German princes got together, and they got together with King Charles V, and they signed this big peace treaty that said each German prince could decide whether he was going to be Catholic or Lutheran and still be within the realm of the Holy Roman Empire. And that was kind of how the Protestant thing went in Central Europe, or in the Holy Roman Empire.